The PlayStation, N64, Sega Saturn era birthed some of the greatest games of all time. Super Mario 64, Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil 2 are some of the best games that generation had to offer, and I honestly believe they've held up extremely well and are totally worth playing today. But, and this is a big but, many games from that era have aged like milk rather than a fine wine. 3D environments were new, and there was no real standard or blueprint, which led to many games playing poorly then, and somehow even worse now by comparison. So when I hear about how great a game from that generation is, I'm a bit hesitant to believe it due to the restrictions of that age. A game heralded as a classic for the PS1 is Klonoa, the Door To Phantomile. But does this cutesy platformer stand the test of time for a new player like myself? Let's enter the Door To Phantomile and find out if it's nostalgia or not. Klonoa, the Door To Phantomile was developed by Namco and released for the PlayStation in late 1997. You play as the titular character, Klonoa, a weird little cat-rabbit guy who, with the aid of his friend Hupo, must attempt to stop a dark force named Gadius from turning the dream world of Phantomile into a nightmare. I wasn't expecting so much story in a platformer, but interestingly enough, the developers set out to make a game with a heavy focus on story, something many platformers of the time were neglecting. The story is by no means mind-blowing. In fact, I hate how overly cute it is. But the cutscenes are incredibly well done from a graphical standpoint, and they convey the magical and whimsical environment of Phantomile wonderfully. So while I'm not a fan of the story, it does a great job in adding to the overall feel of the game. And let's face it, story will never make or break a game for me. It hinges on one thing alone, the gameplay. Because Reggie said it best, if it's not fun, why bother? Klonoa is a 2.5D platformer with a few twists thrown in. You move with the D-pad and have a simple 2-button control scheme. A button to jump, that if you hold down you can perform a tiny flutter jump, similar to Yoshi. And a second button to shoot. But instead of bullets that kill, you have an energy ball that acts more like a grab, which you can then use to snatch up enemies and hurl them at other baddies to destroy them. What is super cool is that you can use a grabbed enemy and throw them towards the ground, essentially giving yourself a double jump. Later in the game, you can even string together grabs and throws mid-air to reach new heights. The grab mechanic adds a complexity to the platforming that is much more satisfying than the typical jump and shoot, because it is backed up by some challenging level design. And you don't have to worry about running out of enemies for those trickier jumps, as they will respawn every now and then. The other gameplay element that is uncommon is that you can interact with the background and the foreground. If an enemy is in either, you can position Klonoa to grab them, or you can throw enemies into the background and foreground to hit objects in the distance and open up new pathways. The perspective can be strange at first, but I quickly got used to it and enjoyed the added mechanic. Along the way, there are hidden villagers that can be rescued from enemy clutches. If you manage to hunt down and free all the villagers, a secret level will be unlocked. The collection aspect adds a nice little bonus, but it's not mandatory if you're not a completionist, which I'm not. There are 13 levels total with a boss fight at the end of every other one. These can be pretty tough, but in a good way, and they're all fairly different in their attack patterns and the strategy you must take to beat them. The game never has a feeling where you're repeating the same things over and over, and freshness is important to keep a player engaged. Something that I should mention is that if you do fail and lose all your lives, it's back to the very beginning of the level. I don't mind this, but it's worth noting as it could turn some people off having to replay certain segments. I mentioned the cutscenes already and how good they look, but even the in-game graphics hold their own, especially for the time period. It reminds me of the look of Super Mario RPG. And I think since the game is in 2.5D rather than a full 3D, it helped it age nicely. It's very colorful, and the backgrounds will often show you areas that you have been or where you're about to go, giving each level a nice sense of scale. The enemy design is mediocre. All of the creatures look way too similar. Big puffballs without much detail. Though Klonoa himself looks unique and dynamic. It's a memorable design for sure, and that's something that helps make the game stand out. Because who can pick out a generic macho protagonist out of a lineup of generic macho protagonists? But Klonoa is easily recognizable. And side note, I love the Pac-Man on top of his hat. However, a big problem I have with the cutscenes is in the sound department. Klonoa has voice acting, I guess? But instead of words, the characters use their own language, i.e. random gibberish. I can't stand when games do this. I don't find it cute, just lazy and annoying. I'd rather listen to nails on a chalkboard than hear this baby talk nonsense. The sound isn't all bad, because while I wouldn't be able to hum any of the in-game music, it's lively, upbeat, and matches the vibe of each level to create a cohesive world. And that's what Klonoa nails. It's an outstanding job as a total package. Even if there are specific qualities I don't actually like, each element of the game, from the story, graphics, gameplay, and sound, is well made. Klonoa may be on the shorter side, I finished it in around 5 hours, but it never overstayed its welcome, and it left me wanting more. It's time for the big question. Does the praise for Klonoa come from a place of nostalgia or not? After my first playthrough, I found the game to be a little too cutesy for my liking, and the story is straight up fluff. But there's lots to love with the quality graphics, fun boss fights, and creative platforming. So my answer would have to be not nostalgia. This is definitely a game worth trying if you're a new player, and it still holds up today. There's only one slight problem. This is one of those retro games that are fetching quite a high price these days. Currently, a physical copy is sitting around $200. And I've said it before, no game is ever worth that price. But luckily there are a few other ways you can play Klonoa. You can pick up the Japanese version of the game. There's a remake for the Wii that plays just as good. Or you can download a copy on the PlayStation Network. And all of these options are way cheaper. What do you guys think about Klonoa? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you disagree with my review, that's okay, because remember, it's all fun and games. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you liked that video, why not check out the video down below, where I list my favorite games from 2018 and my biggest disappointments. And if you like It's All Fun and Games, make sure to subscribe. Thanks again.